Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are the Youngs.
We're so glad you've joined us today.
Hey everybody, thanks for being a part of the Keeping It Young podcast. And we had a little bit of a glitch this past week, so if by chance you missed, we didn't post till Wednesday of this week.
Right.
But if by chance you missed part 2 of this episode, I hope you'll run back and take a listen to that one, because all 3 of these particular episodes all go together.
Right. The episodes are the little series about thoughts for singles finding a spouse, right?
Yes. So They all go together. And so we apologize for that delay. Just had a little glitch there. And it was actually an internet issue. And yet we got it up and running. And we're glad for all of you that listen to us. And I think you know, but we are on social media. And we do get messages from different folks here and there, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to answer those, to address those. In fact, we are going to be doing some question-answer type podcast coming up here in coming weeks.
Right. Some episodes. I was thinking too, specifically about this series we did before about thoughts for singles and then thoughts for singles in finding a spouse. If any of you singles would like to reach out and maybe share a story, or if you have a question we'd like to answer. I know we had someone reach out and say that 2 episodes ago, we were still finishing up our Valentine's contest for married people. And so we read a whole bunch of love letters, and then we started into thoughts for singles. And someone had reached out to David. I can't exactly remember what they said, but it was kind of cruel and unusual punishment to have to listen to all the love letters and then jump into an episode about singles.
He thought we wasted 12 minutes of your life, dear single friends. And,
I am so sorry.
Apologies for that, but it just was the way it fit in. And we know that you that are listening all the time, some of you are single, some of you are single parents, some of you have no children, some of you are married, have been married a long time or just a short time. So we're always aware. We don't try to separate it out to where this is only for singles, this is only for marriage. We try to cover all the bases, and we appreciate all of you that just come along for the ride, no matter where you are in your journey of life.
Yes.
And so that's always been our thinking. So we appreciate you hanging in there and putting up with those 12 minutes for you that are single out there.
That is a long time to listen to love letters.
I guess it is. But even our single friends believe in marriage.
Yes.
And we celebrate that. And just in the same way that those of us who are married, we celebrate you that are single and walking with God and serving the Lord and growing in the Lord. We think it's wonderful for you that are single that do the same thing for those of us who are married. So we're very grateful for that.
Absolutely.
And of course, the keepingityoungpodcast.com has a wealth of information. There are podcasts galore on there. And there's a little search engine. You can reach in there and type, whatever subject you're looking for. Many things we've already covered. And so check those out. Some of you would also be aware of the fact that we live in Poplar Bluff, Missouri now. And Poplar Bluff, Missouri made national news over the last week because we were hit with a very serious tornado.
Yes.
And it did no damage to our church facility, well, except for on our soccer field, we have a huge billboard.
Yes, it's a big banner of the school mascot.
It did take down our billboard as far as the the tarp or whatever it is they printed on, the printing. And so that has to be replaced. But other than that, we had no issues at all in the church.
Right, very little.
But there was a church here in town that was completely destroyed as far as their auditorium. And then we had a trailer court that was hit very severely. And quite a few homes were damaged as well. So we've been working through that and helping our community. And so you that knew about it and prayed for us, thank you so much for doing so.
Yes, and we did have several in our church who had massive damage done to their homes. And so we have a wonderful church family. We have enjoyed so much watching them just jump in right the very next morning and reaching out to our church body and seeing where they could come alongside and help. And so that has been wonderful. And we do appreciate any prayers, and we appreciate the many, many of you who texted or messaged us and said, hey, are you guys okay? Because yes, we are fine.
We absolutely are. So thank you for inquiring about that. Well, let's jump in. Are you ready to go here today?
Absolutely.
For you that are single, we've been talking about finding a spouse, just thoughts for singles about finding a spouse. And if you were with us 2 episodes ago, we began with just a little thought about thinking wisely about marriage. And then last week, we talked about how to be practical in your approach to finding a spouse, just very simply. And we want to close out this particular series today with just a challenge to be wise in your approach.
Right. So, and that's different than thinking wisely, because the thinking wisely is thinking biblically about your approach to dating, to finding a spouse. And then being wise in your approach is just to protect yourself from a relationship that would be maybe inappropriate or would be damaging to you.
Or toxic and so forth. One of the questions that has come up, we've had several parents reach out, with the idea of, okay, so fine, we want to help our children. We have adult children that are looking for a spouse, but one mom of a daughter said something to the effect of, all the young men we know live in mom and dad's basement, and play video games. Well, I can understand that kind of is the sentiment of our generation, and yet Bethany and I know more than a few young men that are walking with God, that are serving the Lord as single men, that have vocations, that are making a living for themselves, that love God, that are very involved in the Lord's work. So there are many young men out there. I do understand that sometimes it is difficult for parents. Sometimes parents, there's the fear. For you that are parents listening to this, there's a real fear that what if our children marry the wrong one, or marry someone and he's lazy, he's a bum, he's addicted to porn. The list just goes on forever.
There's even that fear that our children are going to get married and be different than we are. Like, they're not going to go to the same kind of church that we attend, or have maybe all of the same standards that we have. So there is all kinds of fear that goes into looking for a spouse for your adult children.
And I would say to you, moms and dads, first of all, if you have trained your children and you've done all you can to raise them, then rely on the Lord to take care of your adult children.
Yes. They
may very well go to a church you don't necessarily prefer by your taste, or they may end up marrying someone. When your son or daughter gets married, they are marrying into a new family.
Yes.
And there will be different ideas about church, and different ideas about music, or different ideas about dress. There's any number of things in there. So moms and dads, don't approach that as a negative thing, as a fearful thing. That actually is a very normal thing. And if you've trained your children well and you help them to navigate the right conversations, which is what we're talking about today for you that are single, the idea of being wise in your approach starts really with the questions that you should ask before any relationship becomes very serious.
Right.
And so, in fact, let's just jump in and start there, because that does help to answer that question.
And I think this can help the parents along with the young adults who are looking maybe for a spouse.
When our children, we didn't, this is not original to us, but when our children began this idea of we're looking for a spouse, they're old enough, they're ready to be married, there were several questions that were important to us, and these are not necessarily deal breakers. A few are. There are some deal breakers in these, but mostly these help us to make a wise examination. They show us where we need counsel, where we need caution, and the questions like, what is your spiritual testimony? So it is very important, single friends, when you start the process of looking for a spouse, the fact of the matter is, start with the spiritual testimony. And sometimes you don't have to ask that. You can look around and say, does this young man walk with God? Does this young lady walk with God? Are they faithful to church? Do they serve in church? Do they just attend and walk out, but they never sing? Look at the young man. Does he sing when there's congregational singing? Look at the young lady. Does she sing? And so you can observe to begin with. The Bible is very clear. Let's just start here. The Bible is very clear that as believers, we are to have no fellowship with those who are not believers.
Right.
So if it is never God's will for you to marry, if you're a Christian, for you to marry someone who is not a Christian.
Right.
If that's true that it's not God's will for you to marry them, don't date them. Certainly don't move in together, because then you're violating Scripture on multiple levels.
Yes.
That is violating, God's prohibition about fornication, about adultery, and all of that. But examine their spirituality. And once here's a young man or young lady that attends church, even a like-minded church. Here's a young man, young lady that believes similar to I do, that professes faith in Jesus Christ. At that point, then you can inquire, early in a, if you're going out early in a relationship, tell me your testimony.
Right.
And you can tell a lot about a person when they start telling you about how they came to know Christ, about their faith. And you may find out that they go to church but have never been born again the Bible way. You may find out that they know Christ and haven't grown in the Lord spiritually. So this conversation starts. How is your spiritual walk with God? That's a great place to start, your spiritual testimony.
Yes.
And then there's a few others here. I think this is important. And for you that have children, just be alert that we're going to use a word here that, is a little, your kids might want to know what it is. But we always want to know about the virginity. Mm-hmm. Have you had sexual relations? Have you been, sexually active with other partners? Or are you pure and clean?
Yes.
We want to know about porn. Is porn a part of your life? Has it ever been a part of your life? Is it a part of your life now? If it is not now, but it was in the past, how long has it been since you viewed it, and what have you done to overcome it? That's a multi-question evaluation right there, but an important one.
It is.
And on many levels. It's important because if a person has been viewing pornography as a steady diet, it has affected their thinking. It has affected their mind. It has affected how they view sexuality, how they view young men or young ladies. Mm-hmm. And so that's an important question. Someone says, well, is that a deal breaker? It could be.
Yes.
In our children's lives, the idea was if you're involved in pornography, if you've been involved in, we want to know details. How long is the last time? When, how much of a part, when did it start? When did it end? Is it still ongoing? And Beth and I wouldn't necessarily say this is, okay, we're closing the door. It certainly is cause for postponement. Until you take these steps, until you eradicate this from your heart, until you prove that you're walking in purity, mm-hmm. then the marriage and the dating relationship is not an option.
Right.
And that's our personal view on that, and I think we could back that up with the Bible.
Yes.
And a couple of others here, all right?
And then we want to know, have you ever been involved, or are you involved now in drugs or alcohol? That's very important.
That is very important. If a person has been, involved in alcohol, the question is there, are you drunk? Why do you drink? Mm-hmm. Where, how? That's important to know. Alcohol is very addicting. Alcohol has been very damaging to many marriages, to many families. Right. It is damaging to health. There are just many reasons to have that conversation, and especially about drugs. Mm-hmm. And in our generation, marijuana may be legal in many places, but you should know about it. It will affect a person's mind. It will affect a person's energy levels. It will affect a person's thinking. And it can also, especially in our culture, all statistics let us know that the marijuana of today, the CBD or whatever terms it goes by, all of that is far more potent, far more powerful than in previous generations, and therefore is far more addictive. Right. And has far more ramifications. Mm-hmm. Here's another one, and that's the word debt.
Yes.
And that's important to know, because if a young man or young lady, if they're highly, if they are heavily in debt and you marry them, whether you like it or not, their debt now is part of your life.
Right.
Right. And so that's important. Any thoughts you'd have about any of those?
Well, I would say, you may start dating someone and maybe they were saved in their mid-20s or in their early 30s. And so they did have what we would call a past. They do have sin that was in their past. Maybe there was some immorality, maybe some porn addiction or alcohol addiction. And so you might start digging down into their testimony and thinking, oh, okay, this was not what I was thinking. But if they are saved, that they have gotten victory over all of these different things, you don't want to say, well, you're not a candidate at all. Maybe you have set a standard in your life that you're like, no, I have saved myself for marriage and I want to marry someone who has saved themselves for marriage, and that's perfectly fine. And so all of you parents out there, don't be scared about this, but there are some young ladies who may start dating a young man or vice versa, and they're just thinking, they are sold out to God, and their past does not have any binding on them at all right now. And I do feel like he is a new creature in Christ, or she's a new creature in Christ, and we can move forward with that. And that's perfectly okay. So what we're saying about these questions is it's just something that you do need to know. This isn't something you need to come out, when you've been married for 6 months and all of a sudden you find out, oh, you had a problem with this, and all of a sudden it's coming back out, and maybe you're having a struggle with it again. So these are all things you need to be aware of, and also aware of how are they walking in victory? Are they walking in victory, or are they still struggling with this?
Yes, and all kinds of questions come into play there as you're evaluating. Is there accountability? How long's it been? Is there proof? Because anybody has a past. There's all kinds of things in our past that, because none of us are perfect.
Right.
But it is important when you're thinking about committing the rest of your life in a covenant relationship with this person that you evaluate wisely, that you know exactly where they're coming from, what their past is, what's going on in their life. And we are so thankful for the grace of God. Don't get us wrong. A young man who has struggled with pornography but is living in victory, he is forgiven, he is clean.
Yes.
A young man who perhaps had an issue with drugs or alcohol somewhere in the past, but say for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, he's been walking in victory, he's clean, he's made things right. There's proof in his life that he's clean, that she's made things right. The point there is to evaluate so that we are never caught off guard.
Right.
And because we know now that this is a weakness. We know here is a potential weakness that we always have to be aware of, that we always have to be alert to, that we always have to be helpful about. And going into a marriage where you're going to give your life to that person, knowing this is important.
It is. And it's not something that, let's say, there's a struggle with pornography and your young man seems to be walking in victory and everything's fine. It's not that you need to go into marriage scared to death that he's going to stumble and struggle again, although you do need to be aware that maybe you want to make sure that he is accountable, that he is walking with someone, because pornography is so prevalent in our society. It is just so easy to see it, not even meaning to see it. And so it is something that, girls, you just want to be very aware of.
And so here's one more thing just to help you be wise in your approach. I was recently listening to an Art of Manliness, reading an Art of Manliness article entitled How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk.
I love that title.
By Dr. John Van Epp, who is, he is listed as a relationship expert. And I just thought some of the things that was written was worth our sharing with you as an audience. And the article began with these words: your friends saw the red flags, your family voiced their concerns, but you were so caught up in the excitement of new love that you missed all the warning signs. Now you're stuck in a relationship that makes you absolutely miserable. Why does this happen? According to researchers at University College London, quote, feelings of love lead to a suppression of activities in the areas of the brain controlling critical thought, end of quote. In other words, this is quite humorous to me. Love can not only make you blind, it can make you stupid.
Yes.
And the idea there is that when we have these feelings of love, we miss the proper way to evaluate a relationship.
Right.
And so Dr. Epp lists just a variety of how can you keep your brain switched on while dating. How can you dodge potential bullets in the realm of marriage? And he actually listed 5 ways here, and we'll close this series just by briefly talking through these. He called them F.A.C.E.S, and F-A-C-E-S.
So it's an acronym.
An acronym. The first one was family dynamics and background. And isn't that true?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yes. One of the ways to evaluate, am I interested in this young man or this young lady, is to get to know their relationships in the family.
Yes.
What's her daddy like? What's her mama like? How's their relationship with mom or dad? His relationship with his mom? What am I marrying into? Because he will be, she will be, in some ways, very much the product of the home in which they were raised.
Right. And one of the things that the author brought out was that you should observe the parents' marriage. Are they even still together? Are they happily married? What is the dynamic between her parents? Is it a complementary marriage, as we would see in the Bible, where the male is the leader, the husband is the leader, and the wife follows her husband? Does it have that kind of dynamic? Or is it more egalitarian, where mama has a little more of the leadership in the role? And one of the things I saw that the author had said is that it doesn't necessarily mean that their child is going to bring all of that into their marriage. It is true that you can grow up in a home and you can learn a lot about what not to do And so as you grow and you mature in the Lord, you can be like, you know what? My parents might have behaved that way, or our home life might have been this way, but I'm not going to do that in my home. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they will bring it into the home. The author actually said sometimes the apple does fall very far from the tree. But those are things that you want to be aware of. What's that family dynamic like?
Yes, and some questions, just to help you, are their parents happily married? Do both of them work, or does one stay at home with the kids? What was their parenting style? How did they handle finances? Are they close in their relationships? Do the siblings get along? Do they stay in touch? Why or why not? There's just a ton of questions that was asked in relation to this particular one. And so it's worth evaluating the idea of family dynamics and backgrounds. What's the next one there?
The next one is attitudes and actions of a mature conscience.
The idea, this is about helping you to figure out if you're dating a healthy and mature adult.
This is a question that you really should ask in this culture.
Unlike, the family questions have one side to them, these questions are looking for a specific kind of answer.
Yes.
You want to know the answer, am I dating someone who is more mature or less mature? So, these kind of, as you're evaluating the attitudes and actions of their conscience, do they live by a set of principles and like, this is right, this is wrong, and they live by that?
Yes.
Do they have a sense of, do they make wise and kind choices?
Right.
That's important.
Or are they just selfish?
Yeah. How do they handle when they're wrong? Are they defensive? Are they open to feedback? Do they get angry? Would you say they're stable versus moody? Impulsive, neurotic? Do they respect boundaries? Do they take the initiative? Or do they wait till someone orders them to take action? Do they have goals for their life? Are they achieving any of those goals? This is just looking at ways to say, am I dating a person whose family is going to be a negative or a positive?
Right.
Am I dating someone who is mature in the sense that they are living a healthy life and they will not be a hindrance in our relationship because they are mature, they're goal-oriented, they take the initiative, they're hardworking.
Right, and they also look for other people's perspective instead of just their own perspective.
Absolutely, and that really is a huge one. Before we run out of time, let's get these others. C stands for?
Compatibility potential.
Are we compatible? According to this relationship expert, the strongest relationships have both similarities and differences. It's not that they agree on everything, but the point is they really do align. They align on the big things.
Yes.
There are some things that we do need to line on. What are just line up on our values, the goals of our life, our lifestyle preferences, things like family, religion, and money.
Yes.
We don't have to have identical interests. You and I don't always have identical interests in the things we love to do, but the fact of the matter is our family, our religion, our money, the goals for our lives, the preferences you and I had about our lifestyles,
right,
those all lined up, and that brought us into a very compatible potential.
Right.
And we knew that we could make our marriage work.
And I think really if you're following biblical principles as far as you're in trying to find a spouse and then you're trying to find someone who has the same spiritual goals that you have, as far as I want to line up with the Word of God and I want our family to line up with the Word of God, that's one of the things that you really need to nail down. If he loves sports and you don't love sports, that's not necessarily a compatibility thing, but spiritual issues, those are a compatibility thing.
And you can also talk about things under this idea is the idea of how many kids do you want? What do you think about family roles? Who's responsible to do what? Do you have similar ideas about spending or saving money? Are there any hobbies you have in common? Are there any things that this person does this person have a goal that you absolutely detest? And because that's gonna come into the marriage if you pursue this relationship.
It is.
And do you even how do you think about physical affection? About socializing? Or do you have the same interest in your health and your fitness or your energy levels?
Right.
These are just things to think, are we compatible? If I was living with this person 24 hours, 7 days, 365 days, the rest of my life, are we compatible?
Yes.
So that's a really good one.
One of the questions was, do you share a similar sense of humor? And girls, this is very important because when you're dating, you can just think he's hilarious about everything. He's so funny.
Is this a testimony
he's
by
so
chance?
funny. And then after you've been married for, however many years, and he's telling the same jokes, are you still going to laugh? Or is it going to be something that you're going to roll your eyes a little bit? Or is it going to be something that is going to absolutely get on your last nerve? That's what you need to know, because it's so popular in our culture for girls to make fun of their husband's sense of humor and just be like, oh my goodness, that's not even funny. And then they downgrade their husband so much. So just be careful about that. Really be honest about it. Are you just like being all cutesy? Oh my goodness, he's so funny. And deep down in your heart, like, that's not funny at all. Then you need to maybe evaluate that.
Okay, excellent. And then we have two others. Examples of previous friendships or relationship patterns.
Oh, this is very important.
It's an easy way to evaluate. This just simply says, how have they responded to things? Have they developed the skills that show that they have been able to maintain strong, respectful, fulfilling connections with other friends and partners?
Yes.
And that's just super important. How do they treat other people, like those who serve them? Are they rude to people, cashiers, attendants, and so forth?
Yes.
Do they have road rage?
Oh, dear. If Charity were sitting here, she would be poking me right now. She'd be like, Mom, but I don't really have road rage. It's just, when people drive like a granny on an interstate, you just shouldn't do that. Anyway.
And so Bethany talks to them. So Bethany has conversations with people in other cars on interstates who have no idea that they're being talked to by my wife.
Yes.
But it's wonderful, and Charity has a heyday with it. Here's underneath this one, have they been fired? Do they have close friends? Do they criticize? They have a critical spirit. Do they criticize others? And was there anyone they've dated seriously before they dated you, and what happened? Did they have a huge knockdown, drag-out fight? Did they end up hating each other's guts? This helps you to evaluate, to be wise.
And I think one of the things you do need to be aware of is if they've been in multiple relationships and they've gotten to a certain point where everyone around them thinks, oh, this is very serious and they're probably going to get married. And then all of a sudden they're not even friends anymore. So you just need to be careful about that.
Absolutely. And then the last one that Dr. Ebb puts in here, have I got that name right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Van Ebb.
The last one he puts in here is skills. F.A.C.E.S, the last S there, skills for relationship. And what you're looking at there is, does this person have relationship skill? Do they pay attention when you're talking, or are they always looking at their phone?
Or at their wrist, at their Apple Watch?
Do they interrupt when you're talking? Do they correspond as far as they ask questions, they dialogue, they try to fully understand? Do they have compassion, genuine concern, and so forth? What do they when they have a problem? Do they talk about it calmly, or do they blow up? Do they become passive aggressive? This isn't. All of these are essential. Do they have gratitude? Are they honest? These are essential skills for relationships.
Yes.
And what Dr. Van Ebb says at the end of his book, he teaches this idea that if you're going to avoid falling in love with a jerk, you get to know someone through, and he gives 3 T's. And I just thought this was great, through talk. You talk all the time about everything. Togetherness. You spend time together so you can evaluate, and you give it time.
Yes.
Now, there are stories, of course, of people who were, they met each other, 3 months later they got married, and they're living happily ever after.
Yes.
That does happen. But typically that happens because when they got married, they discovered that they were very similar. They had very similar interests. They had very similar in their personalities and their desires and their goals and their faith and their political views, and everything just clicks there. Mm-hmm. But that is often the exception in our culture.
Right.
And so it really does take a little time to evaluate. Look at your single friends, look for counsel. Ask, if he's a member of a church or she's a member of a church, ask their pastor, ask their Sunday school director, ask their singles pastor. Maybe even ask someone they work with on a daily basis. Maybe ask mom or dad. Yes. We loved at our son Matthew and his wife Carrot's wedding. Part of the wedding ceremony, her dad came up with this idea. Her dad had me speak to Carrot and share with Carrot just a challenge about, you're marrying my son, and here's what he's like, and here's some things you ought to know about him. And then he shared some things with our son. It was a very intimate, sweet part of that of that marriage ceremony. In fact, I got everybody crying, and so it was, it was obviously a win. When everybody's crying, that's a win-win, and it was really good. But the whole point there is that you don't have to wait to a wedding to get those. Talk to moms and dads and brothers and sisters and evaluate. And because marriage is one of the most important institutions in the Bible, and it's also one of the matters of our life that takes a ton of work.
Yes.
So we need to be as wise as we can.
Absolutely.
All right. Any final thoughts?
I would say to you singles who have listened and are maybe furiously taking notes about all of these evaluations that you could do, take them to heart and then pray them over. And maybe as you're praying about the Lord bringing someone into your life, use them. Don't get so blinded by, you know what, I'm this age old and this person is my life and this is the only person ever. And I know that they don't fit all the evaluations, but I think it'll be okay. Just be careful about that. And then all of you parents that are listening, don't take all of these evaluations and think, okay, we have to check every box and I'm going to keep my child from dating anyone or getting married because there's just no one good enough. Don't parent from fear. Parent from a heart at rest that if you have prayed for this child and the Lord brings someone into their life, quite possibly that is the one for them. They may not check every single box, meaning that you probably, all of us parents think no one is good enough for our child. But just be very careful about that. Don't parent from fear. Just parent from a heart of rest that you've prayed about it, your child's praying about it, and the Lord is working.
And moms and dads, I will tell you that Bethany and I are witnesses that helping our children to navigate these wisely, carefully, gently, it pays off. And having children who are married and have great marriages and are doing well, we are super thankful for that.
Yes,
and that's our prayer for all of you who are single and all of you that are parents helping your children. We're out of time, and I guess we should sign off today. Thanks for listening to the Keeping It Young podcast. And whatever else you do this week, make sure that you serve the Lord with gladness.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a F.A.C.E.S media production.